Welcome to Conversations with Sarah. Today, I'm joined by Carol to have a conversation about mental health. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much for joining me. So we're going to talk a little bit about your training that you've done and how you use mental health in your life. So I'm really interested in energy healing. So this is a topic that I'm looking forward to learning lots and lots about. So what led you into energy healing?
I had suffered with lower back issues for years and years and years that were gradually getting worse. In particular, my pelvis would go out of line. And I started seeing an osteopath who I saw so frequently that he's actually become a personal friend. And over a few years, I would go and see him. He'd put my pelvis back in place. If you've ever had that done, you'll know how painful that is to have your body manipulated like that. And it would stay in for maybe a week, and then it would go out again, then it would stay in for maybe a few days, and it would go out again. And gradually over time, I got to the point where I'd lay on his couch, he'd put my pelvis back in place and anything else that might have gone out. So by the time I got off of his couch and walked out of his door, it had gone out of place again.
Wow.
And luckily, because he'd become a friend, he wasn't charging me a fortune, which was great.
Yeah.
Which meant I could afford to go as frequently as I needed to. But I was going 2-3 times a week. It was ridiculous.
Which is, it's just not sustainable, is it?
It isn't sustainable. And I went to see him one day, and it was the worst session I've ever had. And he literally chased, I'll say the pain, but it wasn't just pain. He chased the issue around my body. So he put my pelvis in on the left side. The right side went out. He put my pelvis in on the right side. My pubic bone went out. He put my pubic bone back. My neck went out. He put my neck back in one side, then the other side. By the time he'd done all of that, worked on my knees, my ankles, my pelvis had gone out of line again. And honestly, Sarah, I could barely walk.
Yeah.
By the time he'd finished with me, I could barely walk. And the next day, he messaged my husband, who had been to him for treatment as well. He said, I need to see you and Carol. Please, can you bring Carol to my practice? I need to have a chat with you. So I thought, oh, crikey. Yeah, I felt really bad about it, a bad feeling, knew it wasn't going to be good news. But we went, and he just looked at me and he said, I can't help you anymore. He said, I'm sorry, but I am not helping you. This is not working. I need to refer you to somebody else. Fortunately, he was also, or is also, because he still practices, a kinesiologist. And throughout my treatments, he had been muscle testing for various things. And through that muscle testing, he'd come to the conclusion that all of my issues were emotional. There was nothing physically wrong, structurally. He was putting me back and I was okay, but it was the emotional traumas that were then throwing my body out of line again. So I trusted this guy implicitly. So when he said, I want you to go and see somebody else, and gave me his number, I phoned this guy up and made an appointment, went to see him, didn't know what I was walking into, had no clue, just went. And I was there for 2 hours. So I chatted to this guy for half an hour and told him as much of my history as I could. Then we went through into his therapy room and I laid on his couch and his wife came in. I was like, okay, what's going on now?
Yeah.
And they just started tapping, both of them started tapping on my body. And they were tapping on my head, various places on my head, on my body, sort of all the way down, just tapping, both of them, both hands with all their fingers. So I had these 4 hands tapping on my body, and I just repeated everything that this guy said. Now, what I should have said is when I went to see him, I knew my pelvis was out of place. I could tell by the type of pain. I knew the feeling. So I knew my pelvis was out of place. So for an hour and a half, I laid on this couch while this couple tapped on me, and I repeated what he said, and I cried and I sobbed. By the end of it, and he was doing a bit of kinesiology, he was sort of testing every so often. By the end of it, I got up and I walked out of his therapy room, and I knew that my pelvis was back in place. I could feel it.
Yeah.
And it totally blew me away. And I just thought, if he can do that, so can I.
Yeah. What an incredibly powerful experience. As your first
Honestly,
step
yeah,
into energy work.
mind blown, completely and utterly mind blown. This was a whole new world to me, but somehow it resonated with me. Somehow it made sense. I'd always thought, even as a young child, I used to really question the world and the way that the world operates, and the fact that we're born, we go to school, where we're supposed to do well, we're supposed to study hard, work hard to get a job so that we can work in a job, work hard to pay the bills, and then we die. And I'd always thought, there's got to be more to life than this. That doesn't make sense.
Absolutely.
Why would we be here?
Yeah.
Why would there be a world that exists where that's what there is no point to that? We might as well not be here.
Yeah, it's not about the grind, is it?
I always questioned that.
Yeah.
So finding out that actually there was a hell of a lot more to this, there was a hell of a lot more to life than I'd ever realised, was absolutely mind-blowing. So what this guy was actually doing was thought field therapy, TFT, which, as I'm sure you know, is like a forerunner really to EFT.
Yeah.
So I went home and I just thought, wow, that's amazing. And I started researching it. And I had a couple of incidents that happened where, one example, I bumped into somebody that I'd had a bit of a fallout with. I bumped into her in town. And although we were talking, I felt really awkward about it. And a bit later on in the day, I thought, my pelvis has gone out. My pelvis is out of line. I thought, I wonder if it's to do with meeting that person. So I did some tapping on my feelings around it and what had been said. And lo and behold, my pelvis went back in again. So that led me to looking for some training.
Yeah.
It wasn't far from Brighton. And I found a lady who was offering training in Brighton. And I mean, I looked at her website, and what she didn't know about the body, what she didn't know about alternative therapies and energy healing was not worth knowing. It really wasn't. So I booked myself on, and it was quite a big deal because it was over several weekends. And I took myself off to Brighton, not knowing anybody, went to this hotel, met this lady, and everybody else on the course had a background in alternative therapies.
Right. And you were fresh in.
I was completely fresh and new, and I took to it like a duck to water.
Yeah. And is this the Meta Health training at this point, or is this a different?
This was the EFT. Sorry, so I should have said that. So
that's
I
fine.
got myself
specifically EFT, which I'm trained in, and it's such an interesting therapy, isn't it?
It's fantastic, isn't it?
Yeah, the kind of releases that you can get with essentially tapping on your body.
And bringing to mind whatever the issue may be. It may be, and getting in touch with the emotion.
Yeah.
So so I went to her and did the EFT training, which, again, was absolutely mind-blowing. But of course, because she had so many other different techniques under her belt, they did creep in. Obviously,
you just can't help it as a practitioner. You can't.
And it was great because her knowledge was great, and all of these sort of add-ons, all of these extras, just helped to make it all make a lot more sense. And her story of self-healing is absolutely incredible. If anybody's interested in looking her up, her name is Sam Thorpe, Thorpe. It's absolutely fantastic. So I did the EFT training, and I came home and I ran with that for a while. And what I found was that, apart from helping friends and family, which was great because that was helping my experience and my confidence, I found that I did start practicing and doing one-to-ones with people, but I didn't really enjoy, I don't know why, I didn't enjoy the one-to-ones. I think maybe because I'm still dealing with my own issues. I mean, I'll always be dealing with my own issues. I think we're all on that journey of self-awareness and enlightenment. But because I was dealing with my own issues, which were quite deep, I didn't really enjoy having to get in touch with somebody else's and listening to
Yeah,
somebody else,
yeah.
try and get into their mindset and dealing with their energy. But what I did like doing was sharing my knowledge with other people. So I started offering workshops where I'd get maybe half a dozen people would come along for a workshop which ran for maybe, I don't know, 2-3 hours. And I'd just introduce them to what is EFT, how does it work, do a bit of the demo. And then people would pair up and they'd practice on a light, easy subject.
Yeah, yeah.
And they were really popular and really successful. And I loved doing those.
Yeah. And that's what it is, a lot of it, isn't it? Sharing that knowledge and kind of helping people take that first step on their own journey of self-healing is
absolutely
so rewarding, especially if you're not yet feeling in a space to kind of sit one-to-one with someone, because it's heavy work when you're working one-to-one.
It is, yeah.
And especially if you are a sensitive person or an empathetic person, without that kind of without lots and lots of grounding work, it can become exhausting, can't it?
And so I wasn't ready for that at that stage. I wasn't ready for that, but I had some miraculous realizations and excuse me, and healings in the workshops. Again, everybody was blown away by it. Everybody came away from every single workshop, and I must have done about 6 in different areas. Everybody came away with some benefit from those workshops and wanting to find out more about energy healing.
So how did you transition from sort of learning the EFT and doing the workshops into the meta health?
Okay, that is something that my trainer Sam had brought up during the EFT training. So that was, at the time, that was really her main interest, was meta health.
Okay.
So she'd spoken about it, and in my ignorance, I thought it was going to be a bit like kinesiology. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I'm very organized, and I do like to be specific. That's sort of part of the package for me. So the idea of having a tool that would allow me to more quickly get to the root of somebody's issue, I found that really interesting and really appealing. So she'd been talking about meta health and about how meta health is more of a diagnostic tool, how it can help you to get to what the issue is. And I thought that would be really useful, wouldn't it? If you knew what the issue was, you could then say to somebody, okay, so what's happened in your life round about this issue? And that person would then hopefully say, oh, well, yeah, there was something. And then you're like, bingo, that's what we need to work on.
And it's understanding, isn't it? For most clients, they just want to understand themselves and understand what it is that's led them to the point that they're at now. And then how do I fix it?
Yeah, because knowledge is power.
Completely, absolutely.
And just understanding that is, I think, a major step. Knowing what is going on is a major step towards healing it. So I signed up for a meta health course, which was very scientific. I wasn't expecting it at all, and I'm not particularly a scientific person. I did find it very hard work. It was very in depth. There were a lot of case studies. Even on the course, it was very hard work. And then there was a lot of case studies afterwards to pass the exam. There was an exam as well. But I got there, I did it, I passed, thankfully. So I am a qualified mental health practitioner. So yeah, I started introducing that into my practice. I was working with people on one-to-ones, but not a great deal, because I was still doing what I call a normal job as well, to pay the bills, etc., while I was building up. But I started incorporating that into workshops as well. So that was really interesting.
And how does the meta health work then?
So meta health has been based on brain scans, basically. So for 40 years, the Meta Health Institute have been looking at brain scans to make the connection between emotional issues and how they affect the body. And we all know that stress affects the body. Doctors are becoming more and more open now to the fact that stress affects the body. But what Meta Health does is it gets more specific. So instead of saying, oh, well, you've just been through a traumatic experience, you're feeling stressed, we can actually look at what type of traumatic experience was it? What's the emotion behind that? And that will tell us which part of the body it affects. So as you know, Sarah, through EFT work, you've got big traumas, little traumas, everything's a trauma. You know, it doesn't matter whether it's big or little. Whether it's big or little depends on the person.
Yeah, absolutely.
And depends on the person's personality, depends on their beliefs, depends on their upbringing, and that plays a major part in mental health. So let me try and give you an example. If you've been brought up in a very strict family where you're not allowed to have your own opinions, that would affect your beliefs on the world and your ability to speak out, more so than somebody that had been brought up in a very free and easy childhood where you were allowed to express yourself. So you could both suffer the same trauma. Let's say, for example, you were being bullied in the school playground, and I don't know, whatever, you know, you're being told you're ugly or you're stupid or something like that. For the child that has not been able to speak out, not been able to say what he or she thinks, that trauma could affect them not only because it's obviously going to affect their self-esteem, but it could affect them, I can't stand up for myself. I can't answer back. The other child who's been brought up being able to say something back might be able to speak up and defend themselves against the bullies, but it could still be a trauma because it's affected their self-esteem, it's affected how they feel about their body, how they feel about their looks. So the same trauma can have different consequences, and I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does absolutely make sense, because we filter everything, don't we, through our own frame of reference. We all, you know, if you've always been told, you know, if you can't have a voice, then when you're in a situation where you need a voice, there's a conflict within your body between what you need to do to protect yourself and what you know to do to protect yourself.
And absolutely. And that conflict itself can be another trauma.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's where trauma is very misunderstood, in that many things that we experience can be internalized or recognized by the body as a trauma, and we don't necessarily within our mind cognitively believe it's a trauma, because, you know, it was a little thing in the grand scheme of life. Other people haven't been affected by this, but it's amazing how our emotions respond to things, and then we get the chemicals inside our body, our thoughts around it. Once you start doing trauma work, and you realize
you start to understand, don't you?
So that little thing there, which didn't seem big at the time, that's the one thing that is the root of everything.
And of course, in EFT work as well, we're looking at the root cause, aren't we? So if you can get down to the earliest memory of an issue, then you can, hopefully, if you can deal with that, you can collapse all of the other traumas that have built on top of it. That's the ideal, isn't it, in EFT work? So where mental health helps with that, or how mental health gives us a diagnosis, is that when there is a trauma, doesn't matter how big, how small. I mean, I don't really like referring to it as big and small, because as we've just said, if it's a trauma, it's a trauma. But
whether you believe it to be big or small, the body has decided.
That's just to help our listeners to understand. Exactly. So what actually happens is there is a little tiny mark on the brain, literally about the size of the tip of the pad of your little finger on the brain. And we've got 4 different brain layers, and we haven't got time to go into all of that today, but each brain layer has a different theme. So I will give you an example, but the one that's affected me has been the cerebral medulla, which the theme for that is strength and movement, feeling good enough or strong enough. So there will be a little tiny mark on the brain, and the brain scans have found those marks, and then they've been able to link that mark back to a particular organ of the body.
Yeah.
So
this
if
is
we
where
could
I
all
find it
go,
fascinating when you were talking to, like, explaining it to me before, and I've really resisted going off and Googling and finding out more because I wanted to hear it from you. But like all like neuroscience and stuff like that just fascinates me. So
it's
the
neuroscience.
idea that our brain is marked by an event is just like, wow.
Yeah. And then what they then found was that once they did energy healing work and they dealt with that issue, the mark disappears.
Yeah. And it's
so if we could all afford to go and have brain scans, and actually you can, there is somebody in Germany that does it, and it's not actually that expensive. We could have our brains scanned, find out where the marks are, and then through all the charts that Meta Health Academy have and Meta Health practitioners have, we can work back to what the issue is. But what we need to remember is that in most cases, the symptoms of pain, etc., are in the healing phase. So when you're in stress about something, you've got cortisol, you've got adrenaline, you've got all of those chemicals that you mentioned earlier coursing through your body to keep you going because you're in fight or flight. And then once you've resolved an issue, the body is like, oh, thank goodness, now I can go into resolution. Now I can heal. And if you think of a bodybuilder at the gym, they're in stress and they're lifting all these weights, and all the while they're doing it, that it might be difficult, but they're doing it and they feel okay. The next day, they hurt like hell. All
That's
their
when everything
muscles
hurts,
have gone into the resolution phase. That's exactly what the body is doing. The body is trying to heal. So we can look at the brain scan, or obviously we can't look at a brain scan if we don't have one, but through the charts that we have, we can speak to somebody and they might say, well, I've got this pain in my pelvis. We can look at the brain scan, we can find out, look at the brain scan chart, find out what the pelvis represents. And most things in that sort of area are to do with giving birth and or sex. And we can take a timeline. So when did you first get this pain? And then we can question and say, okay, so what happened round about that time, just before the pain started? And in some cases, it's literally seconds before. What happened round about that time that was an issue to do with sex or giving birth that you then felt better about? And they might say, well, I was in a relationship with somebody and, she was putting quite a lot of pressure on me to have sex and I didn't particularly want to. And then we broke up. Could be something like that. So that's how we would use the Meta Health diagnostic tool to try and get to the issue. And honestly, Sarah, try it because it works.
Oh yeah, I mean, part of my practice when I used to do body work, I very much believe that the body holds our emotions and that our symptoms that we experience is our body's way of communicating needs. So like for me,
trapped energy.
That's like shoulder pain is very much about bearing the weight of responsibility, carrying too much. Like lower back pain can be connected to not feeling stable, not feeling secure. That might be financially, that might be in a relationship you're living. So that's why I find this so interesting, because it fits alongside like the philosophies that I've picked up and developed myself through doing like readings of stuff and the body work that I've done. I've experienced that within my own health. Absolutely. And the clients that I've worked with, that I can see these connections. So when I met you and you told me that there was this whole school of thought and training that can be done, and obviously there's practitioners out there that work with this as a diagnostic tool, it was quite self-affirming, I have to say, because it's like,
absolutely.
So this hypothesis I have and theory that I have,
and
there's other people that think it. That's great.
Definitely. And you know what, Sarah, if you think back, if you go back and think about some of the sayings that we have.
Yeah.
People knew.
Yeah.
Years ago, people knew exactly what they were talking about. You can't swallow the truth.
Yeah.
That's a weird saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Until you learn meta health and you know that to do with the throat, if you get a sore throat, it's because you've had a chunk of information, something that you just can't accept yet. You're just not ready to accept. This can't be right. This isn't so. Oh, no. I'm not ready to accept that. The body will hold on to it. The throat will hold on to it because everything is information to the brain.
Yeah.
So the throat will put down extra cells in the throat to hold on to that chunk of information. Once you've resolved the issue and you think, oh, okay, that's what it was all about. All right, okay, well, I've dealt with that now, in whatever way that might be, the throat no longer needs to hold on to that chunk of information. So the body will peel away the skin cells because you don't need them anymore. And that's when you get a sore throat. That's your resolution.
Yeah.
You can't swallow the truth. Stand up and be a man. Stand up for yourself, step up to the mark. That's to do with the Achilles tendon, being able to step up. As you just said, you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders.
Yeah.
You knew what they were talking about.
Yeah.
It's just got lost.
And
lost
that's
in
it.
time.
Our bodies know so much more than we give it credit for.
Absolutely, they do.
Unfortunately, with medicine has its place, absolutely. I'm not in any way saying that modern medicine is a load of rubbish, because it's not. Clearly it's not. But there is other things that, if we can open our mind to it, can help us with healing in a natural way, maybe alongside modern medicine, because we might need that.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
in a way that is recognizing, perhaps you're in an environment that isn't good for you, perhaps you're dealing with people that aren't good for you, your body is telling you something in it, the symptoms that you're experiencing, like you say, because you've left that, you then start to feel it. I'm kind of the thought that our body tells us the whole way along. It just gets a lot worse when you're no longer in a situation, because like you say, your body's
now trying to heal. But if you haven't dealt with the original trauma, then you're in what we call a hanging healing. And that is what chronic disease is. The body is trying to heal, but you've got to go back and deal with that original trauma. Otherwise you'll just stay in that chronic healing.
It's just I think if you can open your mind to the idea that our body knows and can tell us things, and then start to listen to our body, it is quite amazing the power that we have over our own healing.
Absolutely, it is.
And being
our bodies
supported
are
by
self-healing.
And is that one of the philosophies of meta health, or is that one of your personal philosophies?
No, that is a philosophy of meta health. It's mine as well. And my trainer Sam always says the body doesn't make mistakes. And I think if you just think about that, that is such a powerful statement. The body does not make mistakes. We are not ill, we are healing.
And I think there's something in recognizing, there's something in recognizing, isn't it, that we are in a society now that we're always pushing ourselves to be doing busy, achieving. I definitely know I've been through that experience. Putting ourselves in environments that are sensory overload, being in spaces that aren't necessarily healthy for us, and our body is telling us this is not good for me, this is not good. When you get that situation of you're on holiday, we all say it, I'm on holiday from work and now I'm full of cold, I feel sick,
absolutely,
I'm run down,
because you've gone into resolution.
Your body is now going, you need to not be in the environment that we're in constantly. And I recognise we can't all just decide not to work. That's not how society is. But I think there's definitely something in checking in with your body and kind of being like, is this the best environment for me? Can I change?
Absolutely. There is so much pressure, and I really feel for today's youngsters, because the pressure for them at school, the pressures that are put on them to achieve constantly academically, in the education system is not recognizing other talents that they may have. Years ago, it was okay to work with your hands. It was okay to be a mechanic or a carpenter or a gardener. These days, the emphasis is so much on being academic, on those subjects, that it puts a lot of pressure on our youngsters to conform, to earn a lot of money. Well, to me, it's far more important to be happy. As long as you've got enough to live on.
I agree with you. It is.
Do what you love.
Yeah, the focus on happiness and health, and like you say, you know, we need all these skills. We need people who can fix things, create things. It is as important. It's so important. And I'm a very big advocate for following your joy and doing, you know, not at the expense of everybody around you, of course not. But happiness, if money makes you happy, that's great. If you're in a position that you've got a job that you don't mind doing and it pays you lots of money and you don't end up ill, brilliant. But if you're doing a job that you hate for money, I personally would need to question, like, my health is worth more than that. So it's that kind of, it's finding that balance, isn't it? And the world, unfortunately, isn't really set up in that way.
It isn't set up,
and that's why we need energy healing and all of these. Yeah, we need these things to help us get more in touch with ourself and what our body is telling us that we need.
Yeah, we've sort of got lost along the way, haven't we?
Yeah.
You know, the importance of us, of our health, of being happy, has for decades, it's just been forgotten about. And as you were saying about doctors, I just wanted to say that one of the most important things for a mental health practitioner is that you have a doctor's diagnosis. Because if you can come to us and say, I've got arthritis in my lower spine, straight away we can look at the charts and we can start working out what the trauma might have been. And of course, doctors and the medical system have got access to far more diagnostic tools than we have, x-ray scans, etc. So we welcome the input of a GP or, you know, a specialist. We're not here instead of them. We are here as well as them, to give you another way to take control of your own healing.
And I think that's it, isn't it? A lot of it can feel sometimes like it has to be either or, and very much it is about finding, as I say, with all the things, it's finding what works for you. So link in with your GP if you've got any kind of health issues going on. Absolutely link in with the GP, get them to look at what is going on, and link in with health practitioners, alternative health, complementary health, however you want to label it, and find treatment plans that are going to work. And like you say, with the mental health, having that information from a medical practitioner is a part of your toolbox.
Invaluable. Absolutely, it's invaluable.
So when somebody comes along and then you've got all of this, the diagnosis, you've done the charts, what happens next?
We would then use energy healing to try and deal with the root cause of the issue. I mean, for me, that would obviously be EFT.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be. You know, there are obviously alternatives out there.
Yeah.
But that would be my weapon of choice.
Yeah. So it's it can be a different energy healing experience depending on what your practitioner chooses.
Yes, or on what the client finds works for them as well. I mean, you know, you can use acupuncture, reflexology. Sometimes just talking about it, even without tapping. Have I got time to give you a very, very quick example? Yeah. Okay. So my daughter, who is mixed race, she's got very, very curly hair, but it's not quite afro hair. It's sort of 1 degree below what you would classify afro hair. She came to me a little while ago and she said, Mum, I've got something going on with my eye. And I looked at her eye and it was red and it was swollen. She said, it just feels really sore. It feels like I've got a load of grit or something in it. So I went, okay. What have you just seen the light about? And she said, well, I know it sounds silly, but, and whenever somebody says that, I know that that's it. I know what they're going to say next is the root cause, because you always think it can't possibly be that, and it always is. She said, I know it sounds silly, but I've just been researching about my hair, because she's been having problems with it going frizzy or whatever. She said, and I've realised that it is Afro hair. It's as close as it can be to Afro hair, and I need to treat it as such. I need to buy products and treat it as Afro hair. So I said, all right, okay, yeah, that makes sense. How does your eye feel now? And she went, oh my God, it's gone.
Yeah.
And swelling had gone, and the redness had gone, and it was back to normal, and it's never come back. Sometimes just knowing.
Yeah, and that sounds a
enough.
little bit like, what? How?
Miracle.
Yeah. How does that even work? But I guess it works because of all the things you've just explained.
Yeah, and that
what...
has worked so many times.
Yeah.
That has worked so many times that, you know, I've helped my son, helped my husband with knee problems. We'll just have a chat about it. And because I've got the knowledge, I know what the different parts of the body represent, we'll just have a chat and he'll go, oh yeah, of course it is.
Yeah. I mean, I wholeheartedly, but you know, agree with you about all of these things, and I believe in all of these things, and I've seen the power of all of these things. But I do recognize, for someone who has never experienced this before, it must sound like madness. We must sound like you're like, really,
like we're crazy. I know.
I would absolutely say go with an open mind to energy healing of any kind. Go with an open mind and experience it for yourself. I come from being a very logical, like I want science. I want facts, science. Give me statistics, like, you know, show me evidence. But there's nothing like, and I've had other treatments, and sometimes you just can't explain it. As a client, it doesn't make sense. To explain it to somebody else, it sounds like you're talking utter woo-woo, as they say, nonsense. But the experience that you have is real.
And say until you try it.
Yeah, and do you know what? If it is nonsense and it's worked, does it matter? Does it matter?
Quite.
Yeah. That feels like maybe an okay place to end. Does that feel like an okay place to end? I mean,
fine with me.
Do you feel like you've said everything that you wanted to say?
I think so.
So thanks for being my guest today. Thank you for
having me.
It's really interesting. As I say, I love all of this sort of stuff anyway. So just hearing a little bit more about your experience of learning meta health and your experience of working with it. Hopefully people that have listened, if they're interested in finding a practitioner, we'll drop some links in. They can find practitioners, or you know, the place to go to find practitioners. Thank you so much for being my guest.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for listening to Conversations with Sarah. I hope you've enjoyed today's topic. To connect and find more about me and my guests, follow at SRTT Podcast on Facebook and Instagram.